Son of a gun! Look at this macaroni and cheese! Tell me again I can't cook. Tell me again. Tell me again. Tell me again. Next up, we've got macaroni and cheese from 1845. Tasting history. Why was I gonna say history? Anyway.
I've never met a mac and cheese I don't like. Whether it comes out of a blue box or is served with Gruyere and lobster, mac and cheese can do no wrong. And so I have high...
Speaking of mac and cheese, I have a homemade macaroni and cheese video that I made, and it's on my YouTube channel. I don't have a ton of cooking videos that I have up on YouTube, but I do have my recipe for homemade macaroni and cheese. And it's from scratch. It's from scratch. It's really good. I love homemade mac and cheese. Anyway.
High hopes for this 19th century mac and cheese recipe with the fancy name, Macaroni à la Reine. So thank you to Bright Sellers for sponsoring this video as we celebrate gastronomy's power couple, macaroni and cheese. This time on Tasting History.
Oh, macaroni in a pot.
So if you look at early macaroni and cheese recipes, they tend to be very simple. Pasta, cheese, and butter. The channel Townsends did an excellent video on making one of these early 18th century recipes for mac and cheese, so I'll put a link to that in the description. But since John...
Actually, I wonder what came first. Was it like a recipe for like macaroni with like the noodles? Or did it like derive from Spätzle? Which I'm really curious to know. Spätzle, if you don't know, it's a German dish, and it's made with like homemade noodles that you basically like squeeze out. You can use like I've used a cheese grater before to make Spätzle, where you take the dough and then you get them into like tiny like tubes essentially, and you boil them, and then you mix them together with like a melted cheese. I love Spätzle. I love Spätzle. I'm probably butchering that, saying it wrong. But if you know what I'm talking about, yeah, it's amazing. Absolutely, mwah, chef's kiss.
Had already done the 18th century, I decided to move a little bit later to the 19th century when macaroni and cheese started to flex its muscles. And I found this recipe from 1845 for what I assume Eliza Acton thinks is macaroni and cheese fit for a queen, because she calls it macaroni à la reine. This is a very excellent and delicate mode of dressing macaroni. Boil 8 ounces in the usual way, and by the time it is sufficiently tender, dissolve gently 10 ounces of any rich, well-flavored white cheese in fully 3/4 of a pint of good cream. Add a little salt, a rather full seasoning of cayenne, from half to a whole saltspoon of pounded mace, and a couple of ounces of sweet fresh butter. The cheese should, in the first instance, be sliced very thin. It should be stirred in the cream without intermission until it is entirely dissolved.
Mace, as in pepper. So they mean like the peppercorns. And then you take almost like a mortar and pestle, and you pound the mace down so that you can get the little pepper flakes. So, yes.
And the whole is perfectly smooth. The cheese may be poured equally over the macaroni, thickly covered before it is sent to table, with fine crumbs of bread fried of a pale gold color. Nothing too complicated in the process, and so it really comes down to what ingredients you're using. So let's start with the macaroni. Now you can make your own at home, but you might run into the same problem that Thomas Jefferson did. See, he actually wrote down a recipe for making macaroni along with a diagram of a pasta machine. And then he had one of those machines sent from Italy to America so he could have fresh pasta made for him. But he quickly realized that the pasta was inferior to that he had had in Italy and in France, and it all came down to the flour. He noted that the best macaroni in Italy is made with a particular sort of flour called semola in Naples. So he ended up still importing pasta from Italy, which is actually how most people got their pasta for a very long time. And so, to be appropriate to the period, you're going to want a ½ pound or 225 grams of dried macaroni. The shape of which is really up to you, because at the time, macaroni could refer to pretty much any type of pasta. Eliza Acton even says that there is ribbon macaroni or lasagna, though the tube shape was becoming the standard when talking about macaroni. The one thing it would not have been is the elbow-shaped macaroni that we know today, because that wasn't made until a bit later. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you are choosing your pasta is that it's of a yellowish tint, by no means white, as one sees them when they are of inferior quality. So to prepare the pasta,
Wait, question for all of my chat and also for the YouTube comment section. What is the best noodle for macaroni and cheese? What is your go-to noodle for macaroni and cheese? What is the best one? I really like shells. I really like shells a lot. I also like the really, really, really curvy, twisty pasta that has like ribbed edges because it can like pick up a lot of the cheese sauce for like homemade macaroni and cheese, which is what I use in my my homemade recipe over on YouTube as well. Shells, bow tie, elbow. Oh, don't start saying ribbed for my pleasure. Whatever. Ribbed. Are we still talking about pasta? Yes, you can get really good ribbed pasta. And you know what? It is pleasurable. I don't care what anyone has to say about that, man. Anyway.
Says to add a little salt and a bit of butter the size of a walnut to the boiling water before adding in the pasta. Now, she and other cookbooks from the time say to boil the macaroni at a full rolling boil for 3/4 of an hour. And that's after it's often soaked for an hour or more in milk or water. So I'm going to guess that they very much liked the pasta to be much softer than we often have it today, and
I'd be scared of it being mushy.
Pasta was probably much thicker, so it did take longer to boil. Not entirely sure, but if you are going to boil it for a full 3/4 of an hour, that'll give you plenty of time to pop open a bottle of wine from today's sponsor, Bright Cellars. And I gotta say, wine does go very well with mac and cheese. It also goes really well with Thanksgiving pie. My dad, every year, the day after Thanksgiving, takes a lot of the leftovers and puts them into a pie and then bakes it. And it's absolutely fantastic. You get all the flavors all at once, and I always have it with a nice glass of Cabernet Sauvignon. If you don't like Cabernet, that's okay, because with Bright Cellars, you take a quick 7-question quiz, and they match you with wines from all over the world, curated to your taste. The wines show up at your door, and you enjoy. I also love these little cards that they send with information about the different wines. A little education with your libation. The cards tell you about the different flavors that you might find in the wine and where it's from, like this Cabernet from Chile with the whimsical name Dancing Juice. So whether you're going to be sharing this with holiday guests or if you're going to be keeping it all for yourself, give Bright Cellars a try by clicking the link in the description. And right now, Bright Cellars is giving...
Oh, are they talking about sweet potato pie and like apple pie and... When he says Thanksgiving pies, is that what he means? Because if he was talking about like a pie with like stuffing and turkey and something like that, I was gonna say, I don't think I've had one of those.
Giving viewers of Tasting History a limited time offer of $50 off of your first 6-bottle box by just clicking the link in the description. You can get started today. And not only do you get wine, but you also get to support the channel. Now, there are 2 reasons to drink wine. And while you nurse that glass of insert favorite wine here, you can start your cheese sauce. And for that, what you'll need is 10 ounces or 285 grams of white cheese thinly sliced. Now, many old recipes call for Parmesan, but if Parmesan be used for it, it must be grated. But as we have said before, it will not easily blend with the other ingredients so as to be smooth. Use whatever you want. I'm using white cheddar. 1 3/4 cup or 420.
Now, personally, for me, I like using a blend of like 4 different cheeses. And it can be like anything you want to use. 4 at minimum. Like just different kinds of cheeses. Because like, it really gives like a oomph to your macaroni and cheese. So
5 milliliters of cream, 4 tablespoons or 55 grams of unsalted butter, a half teaspoon of salt, a quarter...
Watching this knowing she can't cook, acting like she knows what she's doing. First message. Oh, you don't know who I am. You know, that's a really good rage bait message. Man, that's such a good rage bait message. Dang, that's a really good... I've literally done cooking streams. I've literally done cooking content IRL for you guys. Son of a gun! Look at this macaroni and cheese! Tell me again I can't cook. Tell me again. Tell me again. Tell me again.
Ooh.
Tell me again, that looks mid! Look at this. Macaroni and cheese. What do you mean? Who's saying it's mid? Look at this.
Ooh, yes. Look at that. Glorious. Look with your streamer's hands, okay? The macaroni and cheese with the cavatappi. Mm-hmm. So anyway, if anyone wants to come over for macaroni and cheese, this is really good. Like I said before with the cavatappi noodles.
Why did it sound like I came? Anyway, we're gonna. It was really good. Anyway, this video I'm pretty sure still exists on my YouTube channel. It's like at the bottom. It doesn't have like a ton of views or anything. But anyway, we're gonna continue watching the react video. Okay, for the macaroni and cheese. I just wanted to go to that video because that one chatter was like, oh, look at this lady who thinks she knows how to cook and knows what she's talking about. Shut the frick up.
Quarter teaspoon of
Tourists!
cayenne and a quarter teaspoon of mace. You'll also need some dried breadcrumbs. So first add the cream to a small saucepan and bring to a simmer. Then add the cheese and stir it in until fully melted, and then add the salt, the cayenne, mace, and the butter and stir everything in. And you can add more or less cayenne and mace to your taste. At the same time, put the breadcrumbs in a dry pan and set them over low heat, keeping them moving so they don't burn. And you'll notice it can take a little while to get those bread.
I thought he said mace. Yeah, he did say mace. It's just pepper. Mace is pepper. So, little balls of peppercorns, and then you grind them up. Do you get dehydrated a lot, need a drink that won't break the bank? Then you should get Gamersupps. They believe in traditional American values, like anime girl guys. It's caffeine-free and caffeinated in 2 kinds of tubs. Gamersupps improved my social life, and now I can stop seeing people in the mirror. Popular flavors include Guacamole Gamer Fart 9000, Sweet 6-Pack, Blowhole Blast, and Sploosh. Use discount ChaCha at checkout for 10% off. Stay hydrated, stay hydrated, stay hydrated.
Crumbs to that nice golden brown that you want, and yet it takes almost no time to go from golden brown to burnt. Now with the breadcrumbs, pasta, and cheese sauce all going at the same time, you might not think that this is a good time for a lecture on the history of macaroni and cheese, but here it is anyway. Pasta with cheese goes back at least to ancient Rome. Cato the Elder's placenta, which I've made here on the channel, is essentially cheese between layers of a proto-pasta called tracta. By the Middle Ages, a dish with many of the same components begins to appear, lasagnes.
I'm sorry, did he say placenta? I know it's different. 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 Did I ever talk about... This is gonna be so unhinged. People are gonna stop watching this video. Watch all the people leave. Okay, so I had a crunchy phase of my life. And my last birth, this is so random. My last birth was a home birth. I know this is so off topic, but I wanted to save my placenta. And for a hot minute, I did read up on a cookbook talking about cooking your placenta. And I had a home birth. Most of the time with your placenta, the doctors throw it away. But because I had a midwife, I definitely had the opportunity to keep it, and I highly considered cooking it and turning it into a stew. And when I talked to doctor about it, he said, if you feed me your placenta in a stew, I think I will actually divorce you. And that was that. And then, and I've been married to this day. I didn't feed it.
The 14th century recipes usually call for pasta to be layered with cheese and then sweet spices like cinnamon and sugar. And the English form of curry from around 1390 has a recipe that just calls for
the
pasta,
sweetest little
butter,
cutie pie.
and cheese, and they call it macarons. In the mid-14th century, in the Decameron, Giovanni Boccaccio wrote of the town of Bengodi, a sadly fictional place where on a mountain, all of grated Parmesan cheese, dwell folk that do naught else but make macaroni.
Okay, I know. We're going back to the story of the placenta. A bunch of you are asking, why would you do that, ChaCha? Why would you do that, ChaCha? Why would you do that, ChaCha? It has a lot of protein and vitamins and good minerals for basically giving yourself sustenance again as you recover from pregnancy. And that was the motivation for eating my own placenta. And I also kind of wanted the clout of saying that, like, I've consumed human flesh. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It just sounded, We're gonna continue.
And ravioli, and boil them in capon's broth. And he says they would roll the pasta down the Parmesan mountain where people would scramble to get their hands on this mythical medieval mac and cheese. Now, regional differences between macaroni also begin to appear. Naples, Genoa, Rome, they all had variations in the flour quantity, the shape of the pasta, and in their preparation. In 1465, Maestro Martino's recipe for macaroni romaneschi calls for it to be plated with good cheese, butter, and sweet spices. Similar flavors to the earlier recipe from England. And the macaroni connection between Italy and England is rather complex. It appeared in the form of curry in 1390, and then the first recipe called macaroni and cheese, or rather to dress macaroni with Parmesan cheese, appeared in Elizabeth Raffles' 1769 The Experienced English Housekeeper. But around that same time, there's a linguistic curveball thrown because in England, the term macaroni not only referred to pasta, but also to a type.
What do you mean, no balls? My husband said no! You can't do it! And so I was just trying to be an obedient little trad wife, okay? I was just trying to be subservient, okay? Like, can you blame a woman? Man, I
type of fashion. Yankee Doodle went to town a-riding on a pony. He stuck a feather in his hat and called it macaroni. Every American knows that song, and by the end of the American Revolution, it had become a patriotic ditty, but it had
no balls. You know what? You're right. I don't have any of those. I don't have those. I can't swing it around in a circle. It makes me sad. Sometimes I think about that. I'm like, man, I have no balls. I can't swing it around in a circle. I can't pendulum that crap. Yeah. That's okay. I understand.
Actually started off as a bit of an insult to the colonists. Some claim that it was a way to mock the colonists by saying that they were so uncouth that merely by putting a feather in their cap they thought that they were fashionable. But I'm pretty sure it was actually a way to attack their masculinity. See, in the mid-18th century, it had become popular for the wealthy young men of England to take their grand tour, which was a lengthy trip around the European continent with a focus on the splendors of the Italian peninsula. While there, they would develop a taste for the finer things in life, elegant fashion, sophisticated manners, and an appreciation for top cuisine like the Italian macaroni. And similar to the Finer Things Club from The Office.
Guys, we're supposed to be talking about macaroni in a pot, okay? Macaroni in a pot, all right? Guys, focus, lock in. You are getting me so excited. We're supposed to be talking about mac and cheese!
These young sophisticates became members of what was called the Macaroni Club. And when they returned to England, they wore their ostentatious outfits and their bejeweled wigs. And had there been a RuPaul's macaroni race 250 years ago, they might have become cultural icons. But that is not how it turned out.
Macaroni
See, the style of dress coincided with a time where it was very popular to mock the wealthier classes, and the fashion just made it too easy. In 1770, the Oxford magazine declared, "There is indeed a kind of animal." Now,
did you just say macaroni of the top placentile? Ladies and gentlemen, my chat.
neither male nor female, a thing of the neuter gender lately started up among us. It is called macaroni. It talks without meaning, it smiles without pleasantry, it eats without appetite, it rides without exercise, it wenches without passion. They were ahead of their time, and the style was short-lived, and the term macaroni returned to meaning pasta. But again, any pasta. Especially in Italy, any shape of pasta was still called macaroni. In fact, if you look at the many paintings and later photographs titled Macaroni Eaters, they are almost always Neapolitans eating long strands of pasta with their hands.
This looks so
more
feral.
like fettuccine or spaghetti.
Look how feral this is. Ugh. Yeah. Ugh. Like they look drunk on pasta, dude.
Today. And that may be what Thomas Jefferson saw when he visited Italy in 1787, though he had surely come in contact with macaroni being eaten with a fork when he was in Paris. When he moved to France in 1784, he brought along his enslaved chef, James Hemmings. And as Jefferson did his diplomat thing, Hemmings was learning the art of French cooking. He studied under several of France's greatest chefs at the time and is often considered to be the first American chef trained in France. And when they returned to America, Hemmings brought many of the recipes he'd learned with him, some of which Jefferson wrote down, like the macaroni. And I intend to do an entire episode on James Hemmings, but for the purpose of this episode, it's important to know that it was likely his macaroni recipe that helped make macaroni popular in the United States, because Thomas Jefferson pushed the dish on everyone. Shortly after he became president, Jefferson ate a macaroni pie at a state dinner in 1802. Hemmings had passed away by then, but it was likely his recipe or a version of it that was used. And it's unclear if it had any cheese in it, and it wasn't actually a universal hit at first. One guest of the dinner said, "February 6th, Saturday. Dined at the President's. Dinner not as elegant as when we dined before." Among other dishes, a pie called macaroni, which appeared to be a rich crust filled with the strillions of onions or shallots, which I took it to be, tasted very strong and not agreeable. Another guest was Meriwether Lewis of Lewis and Clark, and when Cutler asked about the onions in the dish, Mr. Lewis told me there were none in it. It was an Italian dish, and what appeared like onions was made of flour and butter with a particularly strong liquor mixed with them. So he doesn't mention cheese in the dish, but after dinner he says, "We drank tea and viewed again the great cheese." And at first I thought maybe—
What do you mean who puts in onions? No. Hold on, wait a minute. You can make a really good macaroni and cheese with caramelized onions. So I don't want to hear anything about onion slander, okay? If you have caramelized onions, it makes really good macaroni and cheese. It's more flavor, it's good. Okay, like not regular onions, they need to be caramelized, but trust me on the caramelized onions part, okay?
Maybe he was talking about the macaroni dish, but no. Rather, it is a wheel of cheese that was given to Jefferson as a gift. And Jefferson kept it in its own dedicated room, and people would travel for days just to have Jefferson invite them to the mammoth room and see the mammoth cheese. And if you think politics is divisive now, back then even the cheese was partisan, as the man who made it said that when it came to the milk used to produce the cheese, no federal cow must contribute a drop. And that might explain why Cutler was such a grump at the dinner, because he, like the unrepresented cows, was a Federalist. Now, while Cutler might have not been wooed by the macaroni, most of the population was, because it starts appearing in many of the early cookbooks from America, including The Virginia Housewife or Methodical Cook in 1824. It was written by Mary Randolph, and it does have cheese. And the fact that Mary Randolph was a close cousin to Thomas Jefferson and spent time with the family makes me wonder if her recipe is not in some way influenced by a version that James Hemmings served 50 years earlier. Now, macaroni at this point was still mostly being imported from Italy, so it wasn't inexpensive. And so the dish, rather than calling it simply macaroni and cheese, would often be given more elaborate names, like macaroni à la sauce blanche or macaroni à la reine, like the one that we're making today. And even as the price of pasta started to come down, it was still generally known as a rather luxurious dish among the wealthy. But there was a concerted effort to change this. In 1855, Alexis Soyer, one of Victorian England's most celebrated chefs, wrote of vermicelli and macaroni. Pray, Eloise, why should not the workman and mechanic partake of these wholesome and nutritious articles of food, which have now become so plentiful and cheap? Macaroni is now selling in London at 5 pence per pound, and makes 4 pounds of food when boiled. And it took a while, but eventually it did become accessible to the masses. But once everyone was eating it, it kind of lost its appeal amongst the wealthy, and so the fancy French-named macaroni and cheeses fell off of the menus of nicer restaurants, especially those in the northern United States. But in the southern United States, it remained rather popular, especially amongst the African American population. This is also where we start to see that divide between Southern soul food style of macaroni and cheese, which is made with real cheese, and the boxed version that's made with processed cheese. And for the evolution of that processed macaroni and cheese, we actually have to go to Switzerland, because both the macaroni and the cheese started there. It was in Lucerne in 1872 that elbow-shaped macaroni was first produced. And completely unrelated, in 1911, it was 2 Swiss food chemists who were looking for a way to extend the shelf life of Emmentaler cheese that came up with the first processed cheese. Basically, cheese takes a while to mature, but then once it is, it goes bad really, really quickly and can become poisonous if you eat it. And so they would melt it down to kill all of the bacteria and mold, and then add sodium citrate. That would keep the melted cheese from separating, and then it could be resolidified into a block of processed cheese. But did the Swiss put their elbow macaroni and processed cheese together? No, it took a Canadian to do that. James Lewis Kraft was born in 1874 and grew up on his family's dairy farm in Stevensville, Ontario. In 1903, he went into the wholesale business when he moved to Chicago and started selling cheese to grocers off of the back of a rented horse-drawn wagon. The issue was with cheese's short shelf life, he had trouble selling in bulk, and during the summer, without refrigeration, he had trouble selling it at all. So doing a little research, he came across the same process that the Swiss had and melted it down and then added sodium phosphate, which seemed to work better for his cheddar. He canned the cheese and sold it in bulk all year round. And in 1916, he patented the process just before America went into World War I. That's when he sold 6 million pounds of Kraft cheese to the American government to be sent unspoiled to the front lines in France.
Wow.
The cheese business boomed. He expanded and bought Velveeta in 1927, but still, the marriage between macaroni and processed cheese had yet to be realized. But then the Great Depression hit. The story goes that during the Depression, Grant Leslie, a Scottish salesman working in St. Louis, Missouri, was selling his pasta, and to make it more enticing, would put a rubber band around it with a packet of Kraft cheese. Well, Kraft saw this, loved the idea, and decided, we could do that. And in 1937, they introduced Kraft Dinner, a meal for 4 in 9 minutes for an everyday price of 19 cents. One box could feed a family of 4, or a max of 1. 8 million boxes of Kraft Dinner were sold that first year, and by 1943, 80 million boxes were sold, because during World War II, protein from meat and dairy were hard to come by. And that box of mac and cheese packed a lot of protein for just 1 ration coupon. It was also a quick meal for a time when women were working in factories and not at home cooking the complicated meals of years past. And even after the war ended, that quick meal was awful enticing, as one of the radio ads said, "Don't hurry, puff and wheeze, there's a main dish that's a breeze." Kraft Dinner first came in a yellow box, and in 1954 they switched over to the blue box. And as popular as Kraft macaroni and cheese is here in the United States, it's actually much more popular under its original name, Kraft Dinner, or now KD, up in Canada, where it's often called the unofficial meal of Canada. One thing I find interesting is that today we just take the packet of cheese and mix it with some milk and then the pasta and you're good to go. But in 1938, when it first came out, they actually had recipes to kind of spruce it up. And one of the first recipes had a pinch of cayenne pepper, just like the Victorian recipe that I'm about to eat. So once all of the components of the mac and cheese are ready, put the drained pasta into a dish or a pan and pour the cheese sauce over it, making sure everything is well coated. Then sprinkle on the toasted breadcrumbs and serve. And here we are, macaroni à la reine. Fancy Victorian mac and cheese.
But this looks more like like freaking like Alfredo more than mac and cheese, to be honest.
Here we go. All right, straight off, my favorite part, the breadcrumbs. I could put like a whole loaf of breadcrumbs.
That was just Alfredo, man.
On here.
I got scammed.
They just add such a wonderful texture. The rest of the texture is like macaroni and cheese. I mean, very, smooth and creamy with the
It's Victorian.
texture.
It's a
of
Victorian
macaroni.
scam.
The flavor is really going to depend on what cheese you use, because I'm not getting a lot of.
It was mac and
Take that back.
Alfredo.
I am getting some of the mace and the and that cayenne, especially at the very, very end. It takes a second. At first, it's like all I'm tasting is the cheese.
Dude.
And it's wonderful, but like I said, whatever cheese you use, that's the main
Victorian
flavor.
scam.
But then you get that mace and that cayenne.
Yeah.
What's interesting is it actually reminds me of the rice soup in the Third Class Titanic video. And thinking back on that, the main ingredients, the flavors there were mace and cayenne. And it's kind of from around the same period. It's about 50 years later, I guess. But that's really interesting. Basically, instead of cheese and macaroni, it's rice and milk with those spices. So you should
Like
give
a
this one a
risotto.
shot, or any of the other old macaroni and cheese dishes, and definitely put breadcrumbs. I'm going to start doing that just on like Kraft macaroni.
No, skip and go watch my homemade video on how to make real macaroni and cheese with bacon and 4 kinds of cheese and evaporated milk. Yeah, skip this crap. We just watched a video on how to make scammy Victorian Alfredo. Forget this noise. Dude, get real macaroni and cheese from your mom.